Okay, so it states that we have the recording that has been set. I'm calling to order today the West Haven Subcommittee of the MARB. It's a special meeting today, July 21st. And would ask that, what time is it?
No.
We are at 10:04 for our time. And we do have a quorum. I'm Kimberly Kennison. I am the designee from Secretary McCaw, and with me today is co-chair Christine Shaw. She's the designee for the treasurer Wooding. And today, based on the agenda, I know that it's set for 2 hours, but I believe that we could get this done because it's not a heavy agenda. I think that we should be able to complete this within an hour, hour and a half, but let's see where the conversation takes us today. But if we can stay on topic, I think that we could be able to get through this. It's not a heavy agenda. And so I thank everybody for being with us today, and would like to make ask for a motion for item number 2, the approval of the minutes for May 19th, 2020. If I could get a motion.
So moved, Bob White.
Thank you, Bob.
Second
How about a second?
is Steve Felsigno.
Thank you, Steve. Any discussion? And could I get a roll call for the quorum, and just please answer whether you are in favor, opposed, or abstain. Julian?
Yes, Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Felsigno,
Aye.
Ms. Shaw,
Aye.
and Ms. Kennison.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank
that's
you
everybody.
all. That's the approval of the minutes. And so now we can move on to agenda item number 3. It's the corrective action plan. I'm going to ask Frank to get started with the corrective action plan. Frank, can you please walk us through those items that are relative to the city? I see that you have about 10 items that are relevant to the city. And I will ask Matt Cavallera to comment on those that are the Board of Ed related. And let's walk through these open items and what your plan is.
Great. Good morning, everyone. So for the city, the first open item would be number 4. That is related to purchasing and bid documentation.
I thought it was number 2.
Number 2, I believe, is closed.
Oh,
Payroll?
I want you to walk through all of them, because to me,
okay.
I'm not clear as to if this is closed or not. I'm sorry.
Okay, so number 2, the city payroll. The item was that the payroll individual was making changes, or had the ability to make changes to the employee rates. As of 9/1 of 2020, so after the audit, personnel department has taken that responsibility. So any changes to wage rates are now being done through the personnel department, and we are in the process of implementing ADP. We're in the early stages of that. Once ADP is in, that will satisfy all further payroll related control issues as we move forward.
So Frank, question, if you're saying this is completed and it's closed, this being 19's audit, and you're trying to close before 20 is completed, the date that was completed, is this accurate at 9/1/2020? It's an upcoming date? Or was this 19?
Oh, I'm sorry, that should read 19.
Thank you. That's where my confusion was.
Nope, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, that was taken care of post audit, but it is being implemented. It has been implemented in the current year.
Okay, then if it was already done, then I understand.
So item number 4 is the bid documentation that's related to the purchasing. In the past, we had a position that was part-time purchasing person, part-time risk manager. And as the saying goes, right, jack of all trades, master of none, so things get dropped. We have identified a new purchasing individual. That person will start full-time in that position once ADP is completely implemented and on board, hopefully mid to late December. In the meantime, the old purchasing person has continued to do those duties. So there has been communication out to the department heads that they need to file the appropriate paperwork if emergency projects are implemented or if state bids were implemented. The new purchasing person will be responsible for updating and modifying all retention processes around the documentation. So those items are still open. I have not heard of any issues. After the email was sent, I will have a note to follow up with the department heads. Again, we have a department head meeting this week. I will remind them again that this needs to be followed.
One question, Frank.
Yeah.
As far as it states that it's kind of like the first block that you have is open, that's pink.
Yep.
Are you aware of what the actual findings were from the auditors in the past?
No, my understanding was that they went to pull certain files and they couldn't find them. So my understanding is that in the past, there was an employee whose responsibility was to maintain the records and do all the administrative work around it. So that process has kind of fallen there. I don't know if there's a central filing system. I know that the former purchasing manager had multiple files in his office, but I was not given by the auditors exactly which files that they tried to pull that were missing.
Okay, just as a one feedback, in the future, I would ask them what their sample size was and what items you're failing on so that you can have an opportunity to rebuttal it before it gets to paper.
Understood.
Thank you.
Number 5, the city clerk, they were all using one login ID. As of November, after the election, the new city clerk has changed some processes down there. I've been informed that they now do use unique login IDs when they're taking care of what they need to do. So that was taken care of in December, and that item is now closed.
Okay. Item
number 6, the tax collector. That process was implemented after June 30th. We have an email confirmation from the tax manager. The auditor was informed of this. He did concede that it was taken care of, but after the audit was completed, well, not completed, but after June 30th.
So is your date need to be updated here? Is that a September 1st, 2019?
That 2020 should also be 2019.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let's see. Pension plans. We are going to be issuing an RFP. I'm trying to get confirmation from Attorney Tiernan whether or not we have to get approval by the individual commissions, the police commission and the fire commission, prior to actually launching the RFP. I believe the assumption is that we can issue the RFP. There is no harm in asking for information and asking for pricing. But he is trying to confirm whether or not we need to actually have formal approval by those two commissions if we want to implement a single pension oversight. That would be my personal preference, is
Yep.
to have one investment company handling all the pensions within the city.
Agree.
Alternative investments, I haven't even touched on this yet,
Okay.
to be honest. I don't even believe, I was talking to the Assistant Finance Director last week. I don't believe we even get statements, so we're trying to figure out where to even get that information from.
Okay.
Item number 9, the account reconciliation. The Assistant Finance Director, who is the accounting director, he has confirmed, and he will have in place for this year's audit, that all of the liability accounts will be reconciled.
Okay,
And I
so that's
believe
where
that-
your June 30th date is that for this audit, they will be all reconciled?
They will, yes, they will be reconciled for this order. I have a commitment from him.
Okay.
Allentown, I spoke to them. They are in the process of sending everything over to personnel. I will check with Beth this afternoon to see if she has received everything. They were shooting to make sure that everything was there prior to year end, but I have
Okay.
not followed up. Capital assets, Allentown, that's item number 11. They understand that just adding capital assets is not complete. I know that they were purchasing new breathing apparatus this year, so I will confirm with them that any apparatus that has been replaced is removed from the inventory list and the new items are put on. I suspect that what had happened is, as they replace equipment, the old equipment is just left on there and the record is just kept, rather
Sure.
than showing it in and out. And that's a process issue. So I have spoken to them. They understand the need for that, and I'm hoping that they were able to complete that for the year end, but I have not gotten confirmation on that.
Do they
Item
have a
number
finance
12.
person? Excuse me, Frank. Do they have a?
No,
Who
they
did-
have a business manager that they have an office manager that kind of takes care of anything that's needed there. So some finance, some, human resources, helps the chief out from time to time on various administrative duties.
Okay.
Item number 12, the pension fund. Allentown has confirmed that they have discontinued that process. That 2020 should also be 2019,
Beautiful.
the completion date.
Thank you.
They have confirmed they have stopped that practice. So that item is closed.
Perfect.
I believe the remaining items are Board of Ed.
Okay. Matt, are you with us? Can you walk us through
Yep.
your items, please?
Sure. The first one, the payables. After the last audit, I worked with yourself, Kim, to put together a monthly cutoff procedure that has been followed. All invoices are being recorded properly. I did some Munis training on my own to educate myself more on the system, so we're letting things flow naturally right through the system instead of manipulating through journal entries. So I believe this issue will be closed and not show up in the next year's audit. The
Do you-
payroll.
Hold one
Good.
second. Do you have a date that if I was to ask you an anticipation date that this item would be closed, what would be the date that this would be completed?
We started the monthly close in April, so April of 20.
Thank you.
I wasn't given this format prior to put my comments are the date completed, but I could update it and send it over to you. payroll, just like the city after the audit. We put our controls in place so the payroll person cannot change any rates. Also, with ADP coming in, the Board of Ed has appointed their ADP person to work with them, and we think all payroll issues will be non-existent once ADP is ready to go. So as a completed date, 9/1/19 would be the same for the board.
Okay.
The journal entries, number 13, that is something that I'm still trying to figure out how to get to close it. It's really just me, so I'm not sure who else can do it. I tried to have my secretary key punch the entries in, but I was told that wasn't sufficient. So I'm still looking for some guidance on how to close that item. The student activity funds, the schools were closed shortly after the audit came out, so there has been no activity on the student activity funds. I am picking a software system, and there will be training when the schools, if and when, and hopefully when the schools open back up in August. So I anticipate a 9/1/20 closure for that, and the student activities will be all in a operating system instead of done by pen and paper. And then the education grants, the month-end clothing procedures applies to them as well. So grants are not overexpended during the year, and I would say the date completed would be 4/1/20 as well on this one.
Okay. Thank you. Matt, if you are available after this call, we can touch base and I can walk you through some items if you'd like.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's move on to the next item. And does anybody have any questions regarding the corrective action plan from the committee? For the Board of Ed or for the city? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda is the status of the HR corrective action plan, but really it's a focus on the ADP implementation. We've given out the HR corrective action plan, but I really wanted to focus today on the ADP portion of it. And so that was sent out today, this morning. And Frank, can you walk us through the template, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, as you know, we've engaged ADP to take over our payroll and a lot of the HR benefits side. We've been having, or we have, a recurring weekly call with ADP. Actually, there's two calls. One to the larger team relating to overall structure, reporting needs, internal city and Board of Ed processes and needs. And then there's a separate call that happens usually on Thursday afternoon with members of the payroll team and the assistant finance director, more around the financial aspects of it and the interaction on how those actions are going to be captured. So the timeline that was sent to you, that was provided by ADP. You can see that we are currently in the design and build phase regarding needs analysis as to what the city and the Board of Ed require in order for them to design and build a proper system. We are having to go through a series of, well, this past week, what we ended up doing was working on employee self-service options. So what we did or did not want the employee to be able to get into the system and maintain their own information for example, certifications. So if the sanitarian acquires a new certification, she should be able to, or he should be able to, go into the system themselves and update their their records pending HR final approval. So the goal here is to eliminate the need for all paper transactions, to eliminate the, for lack of a better term, the middleman where employees contact personnel regarding life changes, and then personnel needs to contact payroll, needs to contact the insurance companies, need to contact anyone else for those changes to be implemented. The goal is for employees to be able to self-serve, change their own status. For example, if an employee gets married and needs to put his or her spouse on the insurance policy, they themselves will go in and update their status. That will then be communicated to through a communication process. It will make its way to the insurance company. This way we can streamline that entire process. So we should be in the design and build through mid to early September. The data extraction and conversion process will happen between September 21st and November 2nd, with most of the testing happening in the final 4 weeks of that time frame. We are in the process now, personnel is in the process now of trying to clean up the data within Munis as much as possible, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So we want to make sure that the data is clean to begin with, or as clean as possible, to eliminate the need to go back and redesign, reload, rework whatever data is being put through there. Dual maintenance will begin in November. That phase, until the system actually goes live, will be a process where personnel will be updating our own internal records for any changes, new employees, terminations, etc., and at the same time providing that same information to ADP so that the systems remain in sync, so that when we do go live, there are no issues. All of the validation and customized training, etc., as you can see, will happen from November 2nd through December 21st. So that will be the build out of all the workflows. It's going to be all the solution training will be delivered. I don't know if we're going to go the option of a train the trainer situation here. I don't know if we have the bench strength for that. But that is a conversation I'm having with ADP to see which works best. And we are looking to go live on December 21st. That will be when Time Punch finally begins. We have communicated already. I have communicated to the department heads that all paper processes for payroll will be discontinued once ADP goes live. If they have employees that are not going to be punching time clocks, for example, sometimes the police, I believe, are just tracked through their shift commander rather than punching a clock. And those hours and records are then written down, sent to payroll, which is punched into the system. So the process will be, if they want the shift commanders to actually capture this data rather than using a time clock system, that will be captured electronically. There will be no more paper. It will be the responsibility of the police department, the sewer, public works, anyone who is currently not on a time system, to make sure that that data is captured correctly and sent to ADP. There will be no manual checks. There will be no special corrections, as I've informed them. If their data comes in clean, their employees will be fine. If they forget to send it in, their employees will not get paid, and they'll have to wait till the next cycle. I want to make sure that we stop the cycle of empowering them into thinking that any errors made on their part will be corrected downstream. So I want to put the onus back on the departments to make sure that that data is clean on the front end of the process and everything flows correctly. And the final step would be late December to early January, and that is final testing and final transition to service. And as of right now, we are on schedule. We have had several discussions, as I mentioned, weekly, and files have been transmitted. We have been getting absolute cooperation and assistance from personnel. I can't thank Beth enough for all the help she's provided on this so far, and I'm confident that this will be a successful implementation.
Thank you, Frank. I got a couple of questions.
Yep.
Do you have a project lead or a project team at the city and the Board of Ed?
We do. We do. So the project lead, they've identified me as the project lead, but I think it's going to be, Beth is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Doug Davis on the city side will be responsible for all of the payroll data and assisting ADP with the payroll information. And Aaron Sweeney is the contact on the Board of Ed side. Aaron has been designated as the single point of contact for ADP so that they are not inundated with questions and we are not all contacted by ADP with the same question. So everything will be flowed through Aaron. And the goal is to maintain a cooperative effort going forward between Board of Ed and the city.
Perfect. When you're done, is it a combination that it is Doug and Aaron who are the payroll folks?
Well, it will be Aaron for sure.
Okay.
Doug is actually going to be transitioning to the purchasing position.
Okay. So you'll have a vacancy?
So, but we do have the open position that is in the current budget for the payroll HR
Yes.
coordinator down in personnel.
Okay. One question when you talked about the punching of cards and when you mentioned the police, as somebody, I have implemented payroll more than once at a university, so under a very large volume of folks and different types of work schedules and different types of work punching, whether it would be on a computer versus, are you looking into card swiping for your police rather than it's not a matter of they have to get to a computer, they can literally take their ID and swipe their ID and be in?
Yes, we have had the discussion regarding card swipes. I don't know that we've finalized a decision as to how the data would be captured.
Okay, so one of the things that I would just want you to err on the side of caution as far as labor relation is concerned is that those areas that have unions, to make sure that you're paying them properly and on time, it is best that you don't have somebody in between entering their data, that if they swipe the card, the supervisor then approves it. Some folks like to have that flexibility, but I think that it would be better if you put in tighter controls at this time to make sure that you're protecting the employees.
I absolutely agree. And in fact, Kim, I'd like to talk to you offline to get
Sure.
your insight on some of the implementations that you've handled in the past.
No problem. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody on the new ADP system? I'm really excited to hear this and that your guys are getting moving forward with this. It sounds to me like you have a very heavy lift, and I know that the timeline is quite short to get this amount of work done.
Yes, it's all hands on deck right now, but I think if everything goes as expected, we should be able to transition cleanly.
No questions from the board members? Okay, will Frank keep us updated on this as you go along? One other question I would have for you would be, when are you planning audit so that you can be careful about how heavy this timeline is at the same time as when the same team is trying to do audit?
Yeah, we had a conversation, the initial conversation with Bloom Shapiro yesterday.
Yep.
And so they sent out a list of questions where we are in the process of trying to determine what we will be able to send to them off-site, as opposed to them being required to be into the building, because the City Hall has not opened yet to the public. But we have had those discussions, and they are aware that ADP is being implemented and that there will be some dual access to individuals being pulled in different directions. So we are, they have not indicated that that would be a problem. They understand that December 30th is the target that we will have this audit completed this year. They are in complete agreement with that, and that's what we're driving to.
Okay. All right, sounds good. All right, let's move to the next item on the agenda, and it is the, we have some proposed conditions for FY21 restructuring funds. And Julian, can I ask you to please, I know that you pulled this together from prior MOAs. Can you walk the group through this?
Yes.
Thank you.
So there was a very brief exhibit in the materials that were distributed with the agenda. So there's a one-pager that's basically consists of a list of bulleted items. And at the top of the page, it says potential conditions for FY21 restructuring funds. And so this is a familiar process to the subcommittee members by now. You know that the current year's budget was predicated on $4 million in restructuring funds as a general fund revenue source, and that the practice has been that OPM enters into a memorandum of agreement with the city to set out the conditions and the requirements for the payment of the restructuring funds. The statute provides for input and feedback from the MARB members on what the conditions are and the requirements for the payment of the funds. In the MOA that is ultimately executed, it would include, the requirements that the secretary settles on with the city. It would include a timeline and deadlines for each of the requirements. It would set out a timeline for the payments of the restructuring funds. Typically, the payments have been tied to deliverables that are related to each of the requirements. So, for example, each quarter, there might be a distribution of $1 million, and that's conditioned upon the city having satisfied any of the requirements that came due that particular quarter. So in addition to the items that are listed under the potential conditions section, these would all be kind of fleshed out, with timelines and in some cases, additional detail and more description of what the deliverables would be. But as a point or a starting point for discussion purposes and your feedback, we just listed out essentially what we thought the conditions should consist of. And they, for the most part, flow out of discussions that we've had along the way with the city. They flow out of initiatives that have already begun with the city. So I'll just kind of click through these, and they should all at least have a ring of familiarity to them already. So the first one is the implementation of a training plan that relates back to a Bloom-Shapiro report that was actually prepared back in 2018. And that report listed a number of modules in the city's financial system, they use Munis, that were underutilized, and there's still a fair amount of work to be done on those recommendations. And so we'd be looking for a plan and the implementation of that plan to get folks making better use of the Munis system. We would also be looking for continued and successful implementation of the corrective action plans that relate back to last year's audit. So that is, similar to what we just went through, where Frank and Matt walked us through the corrective action plan matrix, getting frequent updates on that, and ensuring continued progress on that implementation. The next item would be a corrective action plan for the next audit. So in sometime, hopefully by December 31st, we would be receiving the FY20 audit. Any findings that come out of that audit, we would be looking for the development of the next corrective action plan, probably in the, around March or so, having that plan buttoned up, and that would be the deliverable. And then, of course, the next step from there would be implementation of that corrective action plan. Continued implementation of the human resources action plan, along the same approach as the audit findings corrective action plan. As has been the practice, we'd be looking for the city to update and receive approval of its next rolling 5-year plan. We'd be looking for the city to receive approval of, I'm speaking of MARB approval of the FY22 city budget. And so these of course would be items that are have a deadline in the sort of January to March timeframe of next calendar year. We would look for regular reports on steps that are taken in concert with the fire districts to consolidate back office functions, and really this could be reframed to cast a wider net and just looking for continued progress in ways to make the districts work more efficiently together, and any other steps that can be taken to assist the districts in resolving some of the issues with long-term liabilities. And then, of course, there's kind of a catch-all there. The second bullet from the bottom is, any new efficiency measures that are identified, or any that can be carried forward from the last list of efficiency measures. We would be looking for those to be a continuation on those. And then there's an item here where, if necessary, an action plan for any cybersecurity or IT security measures that are needed. And in the current year's MOA, we did ask for a description of what was included in the city's IT risk assessment that it completed probably a year or so ago. Not looking for a list of vulnerabilities or anything like that, just looking for the scope of that study so that we can take a look and compare that with some of the IT security resources we have, and just make sure that that was a sufficiently comprehensive assessment. And if not, we would be working with the city to help them kind of close any gaps that there might be. So that's the starting point in terms of our list of conditions, and we are asking for and welcome any feedback from the members, either right now from the floor or after you've had a chance to digest and think about them. Thank you.
As well as the city, if they have any comments.
Of course.
We like it to be a collaboration. No comments?
No, other than to say that for the city, Kim, you know, as I stated before, my goal is this year to have the budget and the 5-year plan completed at the same time and presented to the council together.
Very good. I know that's a heavy lift, and I know you got it done rather rapidly this year, even in the mix of COVID. And I do appreciate the fact that you did not take the extension that you could have taken. So I think that to keep things moving, Frank, I know that you have the best intentions. That's what you've showed us all along. So I don't have any doubt that you will try to conquer that. So some of the things as I look at this, and I think it would be helpful for the city and the Board of Ed, maybe collectively, is if you took a calendar and looked at these items. And it, to me, if you know, everything that we're talking about today seems to have some heavy lifts behind it. Between audit findings, it was good to hear that we have a number of them that should be closed this year. So hopefully we want to have as many that are open for next year for them to add on maybe a couple more, but hopefully not. And then in addition to that, you have the plan for the HR, you have the plan for the munis, and then you have your budget cycle and you have your audit cycles. And so as you look at the calendar at a high level, similar to you have the way you have the ADP plan for the year and the way the HR was done in phases, I think it would be helpful if you looked at the calendar to make sure that you can stay on point and be able to tackle all of this, and if it's realistic, or if you're going to need resources to get it done. I'm worried that you don't have enough resources in order to get some of these heavy lifts completed from the financial perspective. And that's going to be the only way that the city can come out of this, is to get their sound infrastructure.
I think that's a great point.
Okay.
Kim, Bob White.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, I've got a couple of substantive additions for your consideration. As we know, we went through the budget process, that there are some unknowns that the city did a very good job, you know, looking into the crystal ball and trying to figure out what made sense, was not too aggressive. And I appreciated that. But I do think we ought to have a mid-year check-in on at least on two things. One, on the revamp. My understanding from private practice is that the city should have at least a preliminary understanding of the changes in the grand list by around December. And I think they've got until January or February to finalize it. So I think somewhere in there, December, January, we ought to have a check-in. And the condition being that the results are, you know, close to what was projected. And if it's way off, then some kind of corrective plan. But I think we ought to put a marker down for that. Similarly, I think there ought to be a mid-year check on progress against the budget. You know, the more I hear about the effect of COVID on reopening schools and the financial needs of school districts, and the fact that no one's really confident that there's going to be money forthcoming for that. You know, my hat goes off to folks, the school folks that are trying to juggle that. But I think we ought to take a look mid-year on how they're doing, and if there's a need for a corrective action, then that ought to be baked in, as opposed to, at least having a conversation about it, and whether let's see if this straightens out or something. But that ought to be a marker. And the third thing is, I think we ought to approve the use of the sale proceeds, which I think have come in. There's been various things talked about it. I think that's a city initiative, but I think it ought to be run through us. So those were three sort of additions, two clarifications, I guess. The 5-year plan ought to be approved by the MARB and the council, just to avoid any misunderstandings. And the efficiency measures, I guess I'm not sure, and it's whatever you and the city have worked out. I'm not sure if they're supposed to come up with $1.2 million in savings every year, or whether how you doing on the partnership plan and all this other kind of stuff. In other words, whatever list they gave a while ago, that's the list. There's nothing new. I really think they ought to be, and I think to some extent some of the corrective action is going to result in some savings that they just can't, quite appropriately, Frank didn't budget for. But I think we ought to, and I'll leave that to you two to sort of do that. But those are some of the things I was thinking of.
Thank you, Bob.
Kim, it's Matt. If I can just comment on one thing that Mr. White said.
Please.
In terms of opening the schools and funds for PPE and stuff and social distancing, stuff like that, the Board of Ed was awarded just over $2 million in CARES Act fund for this fiscal year. So the grant was supposed to be due Thursday, but the USDE changed the ruling for money that has to go towards the private non-public schools. So the Connecticut Department of Ed is making adjustments to the application. But we've made some orders for PPE for the opening of the school year. Our first order was what we thought would outfit the schools for at least the first 3 months through those funds, and we're also putting together some permanent, like, social distancing outdoor spaces at our high school, and so there is some money, but that money is going very, very quickly for everything we have to do. But we were awarded some funds for that.
That's good, and again, my hat's off to you. But as I look at things like what are you going to do about buses? The fact that there's distancing, there may be more buses. There may be the need for monitors. I don't know how you're doing classes, whether you need more teachers. I mean, the guidance that are being given to schools, I think, is anemic, and whatever it is, there's going to be a price tag over and above what CARES has done. Anyway, I just think we're going to check in.
Absolutely.
Things are fluid, and I really hope more money's coming. Coming to schools. It is important. You've got tough decisions to make. So anyway, I just want a marker of some sort.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Good point, Bob. Any other discussion? Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the review and discussion of the GO bond issuance. And Frank, I am told that you are going to give us an update on the document that we received from Hilltop.
Yes, I'll walk you through it. So Bill Lindsay is out of state. He's unavailable. So I told him I would take the lead on this. So the city is planning to issue general obligation bonds this year. The target date for closing right now is September 23rd. A calendar has been put together by Hilltop and by Pullman to identify specific needs during that time frame. Just an overall, to walk you through a little overall, is that the city has been issuing bond anticipation notes to cover the cost of the high school. It has always been the city's financial plan to issue those anticipation notes and then to issue general obligation bonds in relatively equal proportions, $13 million in three different issuances to cover the anticipated final cost for the city side of the high school project. That $13 million is included in this obligation bond that will be issued. As you can see, there on page 2 of Bill's document, beginning on page 2, is a list of all of the projects, the capital projects that were identified through the budget process, as well as through other discussions. There are items in there, for example, under Public Works, street paving for fiscal 16, 17, and 18. Those items, I believe, were covered on a previous ordinance. However, the bonds were never issued. So this is effectively to reimburse the city for the money that it has spent for the street paving against those project years. The estimated impact for the debt service is less than was used during the budget process. This list was sent to Bill Lindsay during the budget process. He and I then identified the appropriate depreciable life on each particular line item. By getting this level of detail from the department heads, it made it very easy for us to determine what the actual payback period of the line items were. You can see on page 1 of his document, it is estimated that given current interest rates compared to what we used in the budget, there should be a savings of roughly $390,000 from the debt service line, which is good news. And so the impact from these items, as well as all the subsequent CIP items, were used to build the 5-year plan that was presented and adopted by the City Council and approved by the MARB. So this is in line with the city's financial recovery plan. And I think that by bonding this information, by doing a bond this year, the city hasn't bonded in I think it's been 3 years. So this will take care of not only the capital needs of the city, but also, in effect, repaying it for projects that have already occurred but never got bonded for, i.e. the street paving. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to field them for you.
Yes, Frank, Bob White. I was very confused by this. I heard you just say that this is consistent with the 5-year plan, but there were a couple of things in Bill's memo that gave me pause. One was that they were intending to phase in the debt, targeting the drop-off in existing debt. I mean, a big part of your plan has been taking advantage of the elimination of the police pension bond or whatever it is in 23, I guess. Is it the intent to put that item back into the budget going forward?
No, and I had this conversation with Bill. and I told him that I want to keep that roughly $5.8 million drop off and use that to replenish the general fund. So he is completely aware of that. I think what originally we had discussed, he and I, was could we bond earlier for the school project rather than spreading it out over 3? Could we do maybe the second bond issue maybe heavier than the original 13? But after discussions with him, he understands that I want to use that drop-off to replenish the general fund for the city.
Okay, so that I didn't go through in detail the impact on debt service, but I as long as you keep that saving, then that makes me feel good. The second thing is, I was not aware that 4 million was going to be, or 6 million, 4 million reimbursement of prior expenditures and another couple million for CapEx going forward. Did we talk about that?
Yeah, I believe we did. I know that, well, in the debt service projection in the budget, as well as for the 5-year plan, and maybe it wasn't specifically spelled out, but the prior year street paving was included in the original debt service projections. And I believe that's what he's talking about as far as the reimbursement goes.
So is that, so essentially there's going to be a 4 million slug of money coming back, or whatever it was for the prior years.
Correct.
2 million slug coming back in. Is that was that in your 5-year plan or next year's budget, or is the accounting such that it's just an accounting entry? I mean, but there's going to be 4 million of tax.
It's an accounting entry. The capital fund for those street paving projects is currently in deficit because the $800,000 per year was spent but never bonded for.
Okay, I'm walk me through the difference between kind of accounting and cash.
So
you funded
from an accounting
the deficit. Yeah, you funded the deficit from the general fund, correct?
No.
No, it's not funded. It's sitting there waiting for the bonds.
So it's a separate fund. From an accounting perspective, we spent the money, but we never got the funding through the bond issue. So from a cash flow perspective, right, the cash went down, but from an accounting perspective, it's showing a deficit right now.
A $4 million deficit or something less?
That's in the capital, yes, in the capital fund, those individual projects are showing a deficit.
So essentially the 4 million clears that accounting entry. There's no new cash.
It is
correct.
cash. It's a replenishment.
It is cash.
And the 2 million going forward for CapEx,
yes,
that's new stuff. That's in the 5-year plan.
Correct.
And I guess my only question is that a prudent use of bonding given where you are, that you're bonding for capital expenditures? I can see arguments on both sides. I know Hartford took swallowed the pill and is not issuing bonds, but you're not Hartford.
The only other option we would have. Yep, that's a good question. The only other option we would have would be to either pay for the vehicles out of the general fund or enter into some leasing agreement with the bank in order to pay for these vehicles. The vehicles have not been replaced in quite a long time, as is in the case with most things in West Haven. They are on the end of their useful life. Some of this heavy equipment, they have actually broken down, and repairs have been delayed in anticipation of acquiring new equipment. So to answer your question, the end result would either be a liability for the bond or a liability for the financing agreement. But in either case, the equipment is required and would need to be replaced.
Okay, so a deferral, in your judgment, is not an option.
No. At this point,
Okay.
there are vehicles literally with street signs in the cabs to try to cover up the holes in the floorboard.
Enough.
It's a bad situation that needs to be addressed.
Got it. Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
Bob, I just want to give you an update that I quickly looked at the financials, and the capital improvement fund is actually showing a deficit of 25.7 million.
Most of that is the high school.
Correct. That's as of last year. Okay. Any other questions about the bond issuance? All right. I guess we will move on to agenda item number 7 and look for a status update on the proposed charter revision and the schedule for referendum. Frank, do you have Representative DeMassa with you?
I do.
I am. Good morning, Kim. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
One of my roles, Attorney Tiernan has asked me to brief you on the status of the charter revisions. So where we stand now is in September, the Charter Revision Commission last year submitted their final report. In February 10th of this year, the council authorized the question to go on the November 3rd ballot. So at this point, the following 30,000-foot view I give you will be on the November 3rd ballot. Basically, the city is looking to change about 7 key items. The first one is they're going to a city council / town manager form of government. You will still have 12 members elected to the city council. The city will go from 10 voting districts to 3 voting districts. The 12 members will be comprised of the 4 highest vote-getting members from each district. However, each major party will submit 3 candidates, which guarantees you will have 3 minority members on the council as opposed to the 1 minority guaranteed seat you have now. The council chair will effectively be the mayor under this proposal. That individual will then have the authorization for when the council votes on an ordinance. That individual will be the one that signs it. The council will appoint a city manager who then will have the authority with council approval to appoint department heads and commissioners. The qualifications being laid out for the city manager is a graduate degree, 5 years of municipal experience, and the council added that they would prefer to match those qualifications with someone who perhaps resides within the city to take preference. The tax collector, city clerk, and treasurer will no longer be elected. They will be appointed in the same fashion that I described for commissioners. The city council and the elected officials will go from 2-year terms to 4-year terms. The Board of Education will consist of 9 members, but again, they added some minority members, so there will be 1 from each of the 3 districts. So again, you're kind of bumping up minority representation on the Board of Education. Those are basically, I mean, there's a lot obviously that comprises those steps. But in a nutshell, those are the major changes, and the process we see going forward is the mayor and the city council have set up an outreach committee that has kind of been tasked with going out to the public and explaining what this question is and what the changes are to try to educate them before the November election. Obviously, COVID has impeded much of those efforts. The one upside to that, however, is with the number of absentee ballots we will see this year, the thought process is that people most likely, when they get this ballot in the mail, if they don't understand this question, they'll probably call the city, right, asking about it, rather than you're in an election booth and really who are you going to ask? You know, at that point, you're either not voting on it or you're going off whatever knowledge you have. So that's the current process there. If November 3rd, this question passes, the city then has the 2 years to implement all of the steps that would be required so that the following election, all of these changes take place. So the city would have 2 years to basically set up a commission to kind of lay the groundwork to implementing all of these major changes and working with the unions and the department heads on how the transitions would work. In a nutshell, that is kind of the 30,000-foot view, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the members?
Kim, I have a question
Please.
So thank you for that overview. In the state statute for charter revisions, it enables municipalities to create a document called explanatory text. And when you mentioned the possibility for residents receiving absentee ballots not really having a complete understanding of the changes, I thought that the explanatory text might be a way to kind of head that off to a certain extent and get out in front of some of the questions that you may get. Has the city thought about putting together a simple, like a brochure type document that could be distributed to all households or whatever channel of communication you would you prefer?
Yes. The outreach committee that was set up by the mayor and the council is working on putting together those materials. And also, just for clarification, the city did actually, obviously in accordance with statute, printed the charter and actually had physical copies of the charter put into the West Haven Voice for circulation. So every member of the public who got that paper actually received a full copy of the charter changes for review.
Great. Thank you.
At great expense, by the way.
Yeah.
Of course.
So when this was developed, is this charter just done by the city council or is it done hand in hand with the mayor?
No, so actually what happens is there's a charter revision commission that's actually set up. So the first point is the mayor and the council kind of put together a list of names of people who are interested. The council then elected individuals to serve on that board. They then put together a draft document based on public meetings and outreach to the community. That draft document then went to the city council. The city council then held public meetings and made some tweaks and changes, sent it back to the Charter Revision Commission for their approval. And then the Charter Revision Commission obviously had to accept those changes and send it back to the council for their final approval and obviously discussion of the actual ballot question.
Okay.
So it's a combination of obviously the council, the mayor, and this Charter Revision Commission that was established, a bipartisan commission established just for that purpose of creating a draft document.
Sorry, I am not a politician, so I couldn't even tell you if there is inside baseball, not if this is some of the items that are in there, I am in agreement with, and some of those items, I just think about, it just causes me to be confused or to not understand the background, so apologize for my ignorance in those categories. You can't be knowledgeable at everything. So my question is if you were to take the town of West Haven and compare it to another large town, city here in Connecticut, would this be a similar structure, or is this a structure that now will be very different in one of its own?
Attorney Chairman, we think most similar probably to Meriden. The idea is, and actually just to point out, there were actually on the Charter Revision Commission itself, there were actually more Republicans that the council put onto that commission than Democrats, and obviously with the council being weighed heavily by Democrats, I would say it was really bipartisan, and really there was no political baseball. As a matter of fact, I give kudos, look, in my other hat as a state rep, I give kudos to the council and the mayor, because you basically are approving a document here that actually kind of takes some power away from you, and you're balancing the scale more now. You'll have more minority representation on the Board of Education, the council, than you do now, and you'll have a city manager who obviously, will be charged with running the town, and some would argue it's almost a less political structure than having an elected mayor. Again, there are people who view that both ways. But no, I would argue there really was no inside political baseball by either the mayor or the council. And in effect, they actually kind of are cutting some of their own power off and doing this in the idea that it's in the best interest of the city to kind of do this going forward.
Okay, I guess it's left up to the city anyways for those residents to make that decision, right?
Yes, correct. And like I said, certainly one thing I think we can guarantee, since it's a presidential year, that the turnout should be high. So it's a good time for it to be on the ballot.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
Yeah. Kim, if I may,
Yes.
The only other thing I would point out, and Frank kind of just reminded me, just so your board's aware, this is an all or nothing vote. So the way this charter was revised, the public is basically voting up or down on all of these changes. They're not split up, because the way it's put together, you couldn't change the council but then do a city. It just the document wouldn't work. So
Okay.
The public is either going to vote to accept this entire document as it is, or they're rejecting it as it is. Just for clarification.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, we do have one item that but we did not list on here as an other item. Julian received a document actually late afternoon yesterday, and regarding a contract. Julian, would you please comment on that?
Yes. So I got the letter from the city's HR department that there is a tentative agreement for an extension of the firefighters contract. The existing contract goes through 2022. The material I received really doesn't tell me anything beyond that. This is really just a heads up to the subcommittee that we will, in all likelihood, be scheduling a special meeting in August, and then a special meeting of the full MARB to be able to take action within the 44-day time frame. The tentative agreement was signed by the union last, I think it was the 15th, so that would be last Wednesday. The letter stated that the TA itself and the redlined copy of the contract and all the analysis and supporting documentation would be forthcoming, but at this point I don't have any other details other than that.
Can the city give us any kind of input on this? Because we have to set up a special meeting for this.
Yeah. Kim, Lee Kiernan, sorry I'm late, I had to get a medical thing. Not COVID related. This is just an idea of we get a couple things out of this. We get an extension at a very good price, if you will, with the union. It's consistent with the other contracts. They also get a agreement on the partnership plan. So we get that from this TA. We didn't have to really give up a lot to get any of that. The mayor is in agreement. The unions voted on it, approved it. So it would go to the city council. You have it. I will get Julian whatever else he needs so that you can properly review.
We don't have it. We don't have it. We just got a memo. That's all we have.
Oh,
It says
Right,
items
right.
will be items to follow, and we do not have those items. So I wanted to where the timeline is already running out and we don't have the materials.
yeah, all right. Sorry, I'm gonna be on short hours today, but I'll make sure he gets everything tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, so that will be helpful. We need to go through them. We need to share it, and then we're going to have to set up two special meetings. It's too bad that we couldn't have gotten it on the agenda for this meeting and maybe get it behind us.
Yeah, I apologize that was a miscommunication between our labor attorney, HR, and myself.
Thank you for making us aware. All right, so you will be hearing from us, West Haven Subcommittee members, so that we will have to make sure we have a follow-up. That is the last item that we have to discuss. Julian, am I missing anything? I don't think so, right?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, any of the members? Then shall I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Who was that, please?
Bob.
Thank you, Bob. And I'm sure we're all in favor. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone
you.
have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Stay safe.
Matt, are you going to stay on, or do you want to?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Sam.
We're going to disconnect the recording.
Right.